My name is Irene Whitmore, and I'm 35 years old. I'm still processing what happened last Tuesday, mostly because it unfolded with such rehearsed calm that it took me a few minutes to realize my marriage had already ended, at least in my husband's head. We'd been married 3 years together for 5, long enough to believe we were solid, long enough to be wrong. He came home around 7 that evening, carrying a manila folder held just a little too carefully, like it was a prop he'd practiced with. There was something off about his energy. He tried to look heavy-burdened, like this was hurting him, but I caught a glint in his eyes. Anticipation. Almost excitement. "Hey," he said softly, setting his keys down. "Can we talk?" I put my phone face down on the counter and nodded. "Sure. What's going on?" He sat at the kitchen table, didn't meet my eyes, and slid the folder toward me. I want you to look at this. It's hard for me to say out loud, so I thought maybe seeing it would help." I opened it. Divorce petition. Filed 3 days earlier. Both our names, case number, asset division proposals, supporting documentation, thorough, aggressively thorough. So I said after a moment, keeping my voice neutral, "This is happening." "Well, it doesn't have to be exactly like this," he rushed in. "I just wanted to show you what it could look like so we can talk it through like adults. No lawyers, no drama, just us deciding what's fair." Fair. His proposal had him keeping the house I'd put the down payment on, half my retirement accounts, 2 years of spousal support, and the new SUV we'd bought 6 months ago. I'd walk away with my older sedan and maybe 30% of our shared assets. "This is very detailed for a hypothetical discussion," I said. "I just wanted to be prepared," he replied. "Show you I'm serious about handling this maturely." I nodded, slowly reached into the tote bag I'd dropped by the door when I came home from work and pulled out my own folder. I placed it neatly on top of his. "Interesting timing," I said, "because this is what our divorce actually looks like." His confusion was immediate. Then the color drained from his face as he opened it. Filed 9 days ago. Properly served to his office 4 days later. Signed receipt included. You already filed," his voice cracked. "Yes, but I filed 3 days ago." "And I filed 9 days ago," I replied calmly, "which means yours will be dismissed as a duplicate." He stared at the papers like they'd betrayed him. His hands were shaking. "You've been planning this." "For about 2 months," I said. "Getting my finances in order, finding a lawyer, documenting everything." "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked. I almost laughed. "Why didn't you?" I asked instead. "You filed paperwork with the court and tried to present it as a conversation." "That's different," he said weakly. I was trying to be civil. "No," I corrected. "You were trying to control the outcome." Silence stretched between us, thick and final. "What does yours say?" he asked finally. "Standard equitable distribution," I replied. "House goes on the market. We split proceeds minus my down payment. Retirement accounts split fairly. No spousal support. You keep your car. I keep mine." "That's not fair," he snapped. I met his eyes for the first time that night. "It's fair. It's just not convenient for you." He stood abruptly, grabbed his folder. "This isn't over." "No," I said quietly. "It is." He stormed upstairs. I ordered pizza and watched television oddly calm. Around 11, he came back down, eyes red, voice small. "Can we at least talk about why?" I shrugged. "Same reason you filed, I guess. We're not happy." "We could try counseling." "You don't file divorce papers if you want counseling," I said. "You file them when you want leverage." He looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe we both were. That night I slept in the guest room. I've been there ever since. The entitlement didn't creep in slowly. It arrived like it had been waiting just outside the door, pacing impatient for permission. The morning after the folder incident, I was in the kitchen making coffee when the front door opened without a knock. I looked up just in time to see my husband's older sister step inside, keys already in hand, confidence radiating off her like she owned the place. She didn't bother with pleasantries. She didn't even pretend surprise at seeing me. "We need to talk," she said, crossing her arms. I flipped the kettle off and leaned against the counter. "About what?" "About how you're screwing over my brother." I blinked once slowly. "Good morning to you too." She stepped closer, voice rising. "You filed for divorce behind his back like some snake. He was trying to handle this maturely." I met her stare evenly. He filed first, 3 days before showing me. I filed 9 days before showing him. That's not maturity. That's just bad timing. "That's not the same," she snapped. "He wanted to discuss it." "He filed a legal petition with the court," I said. "That's not a discussion starter. That's a legal action." She scoffed. "You're being vindictive." "I'm being procedural." She didn't like that answer. None of them ever did. "You're going to withdraw your filing," she said, jabbing a finger toward me. You're going to let his petition go through with his terms. That's the right thing to do. I took a step back, putting the counter between us. No. Her eyes widened, like she wasn't used to hearing that word spoken plainly. Excuse me. My filing stands, I said calmly. Tell him to get a competent lawyer. She muttered something under her breath, spun on her heel, and stormed out. Through the open window, I heard her and my husband arguing in the driveway. He sounded panicked. She sounded furious. The roles were already shifting, and neither of them liked it. That afternoon, his mother called. She didn't bother saying hello. You need to stop this nonsense, she said sharply. Which part? I asked. The divorce filing. Let my son's petition proceed. He has a right to protect himself. I almost laughed. Protect himself from what? From you taking everything. I closed my eyes for a moment, counted to 3. Ma'am, I'm asking for equitable distribution. He wanted the house, half my retirement, spousal support, and the SUV. That's not protection. That's a grab. He deserves security, she insisted. He has a job, I said. So do I. He'll get half the house proceeds. That is security. You're selfish, she snapped. I always knew it. Thank you for your input, I replied and hung up. I blocked the number before she could call back. That evening, my husband tried a different tactic. He knocked softly on the guest room door, like a stranger afraid of being turned away. Can we talk, he asked. Really talk. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. What's on your mind? I've been thinking, he said, eyes glossy. Maybe we're both being hasty. Maybe we should pause the filings. Try a separation first. Counseling. I studied his face, the careful tremble in his voice, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. Then I asked, You talked to a lawyer today, didn't you? He froze. Your lawyer told you my filing takes precedence, I continued. Told you your petition would be dismissed. Told you my terms were standard and likely to be approved. Silence confirmed it. So now I went on, you want to hit pause because your power play failed. That's not fair, he whispered. No, I said. What's not fair is filing paperwork behind my back and pretending it was a conversation. Tears slid down his face. Real or not, I couldn't tell anymore. We're not pausing anything, I said gently. We're done. You just didn't expect me to be ready too. I closed the door while he was still standing there. I heard him crying in the hallway. I felt bad for about 5 minutes. Then I remembered his proposed settlement, and the guilt evaporated. It started the next morning at work. Around 10, my manager sent me a message asking if I had a few minutes to talk. Nothing unusual in the wording, but my stomach tightened anyway. I stepped into her office, closed the door, and sat down. She looked uncomfortable the way people do when they've been put in the middle of something they never asked to be part of. I got a strange call yesterday, she said carefully. From your husband. My pulse kicked up. What did he say? She chose her words slowly. He said you've been under a lot of stress lately, that you might not be in a great headspace. He suggested we should keep an eye on you. There it was. Not an accusation, just an implication. The kind that plants doubt without ever taking responsibility for it. So he implied I'm unstable, I said. Not in those exact words, she replied quickly. But yes, that was the gist. I took a breath. I'm getting divorced. It's mutual. We're both moving on. He's upset because I filed first. She nodded. That's what I assumed. Your work has been solid. No issues. But I had to document the call. HR policy. I understand, I said, and I did. What I didn't understand was how easily he'd crossed that line. That night I changed the Wi-Fi password. Petty, absolutely. Satisfying more than I expected. When he came home and couldn't connect, he stood at the top of the stairs and shouted down, What's wrong with the internet? I changed the password, I replied from the couch. It's under my account. Are you serious right now? Very. You can't just do that. You called my boss, I said. I changed the Wi-Fi password. Seems proportional. I was concerned he insisted, genuinely. Concerned enough to imply I'm mentally unstable at my workplace. I didn't say that. They documented the call, I said. Try again. He grabbed his phone, muttering using data instead. You're being childish. You tried to mess with my career, I said evenly. You lost streaming privileges. He slammed the bedroom door. I ordered Chinese food and read through divorce case law on my tablet while I ate. Knowledge I was learning is a very specific kind of power. 2 weeks later, the legal process started moving. The first court appearance was procedural. The judge acknowledged my filing as primary, dismissed his duplicate petition, and set timelines for disclosures. His lawyer, a man who looked like he advertised on bus benches, asked for temporary support and exclusive use of the house. Denied. Outside the courthouse, his lawyer pulled me aside. My client is willing to settle. 50-50 split. Clean break. Except the house, I said. It sells. She doesn't want to move. That's unfortunate, I replied. The market's good. That weekend, he crossed another line. I came home Friday night to find my key didn't work. I stood on the porch staring at the new locks, disbelief settling into something colder. I called my lawyer. She answered immediately. He locked me out, I said. That's illegal, she replied. Call the non-emergency police line. I did. When the officers arrived, they took my statement, then called my husband. He showed up 20 minutes later with his sister in tow, already crying. I changed the locks for my safety, he told them. Safety from what one of the officers asked. He's been hostile, he said. Aggressive. Any threats, the officer asked, looking at me. None, I said. I've been sleeping in the guest room. The officers exchanged a glance. You can't lock your spouse out without a court order, the older one said. You need to give her access. Inside the house, I noticed what was missing. My laptop, my passport, my birth certificate, and my grandmother's silver watch. I texted him, "Where is my stuff?" His reply came fast. "Safekeeping. You've been acting unstable." I screenshot everything and sent it to my lawyer. The line between manipulation and self-destruction had officially been crossed. By Monday morning, the calm professionalism of the process had cracked completely. What was left was documentation, court filings, and the slow, methodical exposure of how far someone would go when they felt entitled to win. My lawyer filed an emergency motion before noon. Return of personal property. Unauthorized lock change. Interference with access to the marital home. Request for reimbursement of legal fees. Everything was time-stamped. Screenshots attached. Police report included. My husband responded through his attorney within hours. According to his filing, my laptop was marital property he had every right to access. My documents were allegedly shared records. My grandmother's watch, gifted to me years before I even met him, was suddenly described as property of the marriage. The audacity was almost impressive. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 2 days later. When we walked into the courtroom, the judge already looked tired. My husband sat stiffly beside his lawyer, eyes, red hands, folded like he was waiting to be forgiven. His sister and mother filled the back row, whispering loudly enough to be heard. The judge didn't waste time. "Did you change the locks on the marital home without a court order?" she asked him. "For my safety, Your Honor," he said, voice trembling. "Did you file for a restraining order?" "No." "Did you call the police to report threats or violence?" "No." The judge exhaled slowly. "And you removed your wife's personal property." "It's marital property," he said quickly. "Her birth certificate," the judge asked flatly. Silence. I was protecting important documents. The judge's patience evaporated. "You will return all items immediately. Today. Laptop documents and personal effects. Failure to do so will result in contempt of court. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," he whispered. "And you will not change locks, remove property, or interfere with access again without a court order. The house will be listed for sale within 30 days. Both parties will cooperate. Am I clear?" "Yes." Outside the courtroom, his mother rushed toward me, fury barely contained. "You're destroying him," she hissed, "dragging him through court like a criminal." "He locked me out and stole my property," I replied. "I enforced my rights." His sister jumped in. "You're enjoying this. You like seeing him suffer." I looked at them both and realized something important. "I'm indifferent," I said. "I just want this finished." They didn't have a response for that. That evening, my property was returned. My laptop had clearly been searched. Files opened. Browser history viewed. My documents were photocopied. The watch was returned in a jewelry box I didn't recognize. I changed every password I owned. The house went on the market the following week. Offers came in fast. The market was hot. He rejected the first 3, claiming they were too low, even though they were at or above asking. His lawyer called mine. "My client needs more time." "The judge ordered a sale," my lawyer replied. "Pick an offer." We accepted $115,000 over asking. He didn't speak to me that night. For the first time, the silence felt like progress. By the time the sale offer was accepted, something fundamental had shifted. The noise was still there, his family's outrage, his lawyer's posturing. But the illusion of control was gone. What remained was process. Timelines, orders, consequences. The weeks leading up to the final hearing were strangely quiet inside the house. We moved around each other like strangers renting the same space, coordinating schedules through clipped text messages, avoiding eye contact. He stayed mostly in the bedroom now. I stayed in the guest room. The kitchen became neutral territory used carefully, efficiently, without conversation. His family, on the other hand, escalated. His sister sent me a long message accusing me of emotional abuse, of weaponizing the system, of being cold and calculating. I didn't respond. His mother left a voicemail. Didn't yell this time, just cried, talking about how her son was falling apart and how I'd taken everything from him. I saved it, forwarded it to my lawyer. Documentation had become instinct. The final hearing arrived 6 weeks later. He showed up with an entourage, his lawyer, his sister, his mother, and somehow his college roommate, a woman I'd met exactly once at a barbecue years ago. It felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a performance, as if numbers alone might overwhelm the facts. The judge was the same one from the emergency hearing. That alone seemed to drain some color from his face. The proceedings were brisk. The house sale was acknowledged as pending. Proceeds to be split evenly, minus my documented down payment contribution. Retirement accounts divided according to standard formula. Each of us to keep our respective vehicles. Each responsible for our own legal fees, except where misconduct had increased costs. That's when his lawyer made one last attempt. "Your Honor," he said, standing. "My client has experienced significant emotional distress due to the way this divorce was handled. He's seeing a therapist twice a week. We're requesting compensation for ongoing mental health treatment." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Divorce is emotionally distressing," she said. "That alone does not warrant compensation." But the manner in which my client was treated, the lawyer pressed. Secret filing, service at his workplace, forced sale of the home. All legally permissible actions, the judge replied coolly. Motion denied. My husband started crying, loudly this time. His sister wrapped an arm around him. His mother shook her head as if the world had personally betrayed her. My lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to address the lock-changing incident and unauthorized removal of property. My client incurred $1,200 in legal fees resolving that issue. We request reimbursement." The judge flipped through her notes. "You changed the locks and removed property without authorization," she said to him. "Correct." "Yes," he whispered. "You filed no police reports, requested no restraining order, presented no evidence of threat." Silence. "You owe your wife $1,200, the judge ruled. Payment due within 30 days. That was it. 3 years of marriage reduced to 40 minutes of rulings. As we stood to leave, he turned to me, eyes red, voice shaking. "Can we just talk, please?" I looked at him. The man I'd married, the man who'd tried to ambush me with paperwork, manipulate the process, rewrite reality when it didn't go his way. "There's nothing left to say," I replied. The judge's words echoed in my head as I walked out. Try not to do anything stupid before then. It was almost over. The divorce was granted 3 days later. No ceremony, no drama, just signatures, timestamps, and a judge's final order turning a marriage into a closed case file. 3 years together, 5 if you counted everything that came before officially over, in less time than it took us to plan our wedding. Outside the courthouse, he caught up to me in the hallway. "Can we just talk for a minute?" he asked, breathless, like if he stopped walking, the moment might vanish. About what I asked already knowing the answer. About everything he said. How did we get here? I stopped and turned to face him. For the first time in weeks, I really looked at him. Not as my husband, not as my opponent, just as a man scrambling to rewrite the ending now that the credits were rolling. "We both wanted out," I said. "We both filed. I just did it first." "I didn't actually want a divorce," he blurted out. "I was protecting myself. I thought you were going to leave me." "That's not protection," I said quietly. "That's action." "I thought you were cheating," he said. "You were distant, always tired, always on your phone." "I wasn't cheating," I replied. "I was done pretending." He swallowed hard. "We could have worked on it." "You filed paperwork before talking to me," I said. "That's not someone who wants to work on things." His eyes filled again, real tears. This time unfiltered and messy. "I messed up," he said. "I got scared and did something stupid." "Yes," I said, "you did." "Can't we start over?" he asked. "Date again. See if there's anything left." I thought about the lock change, the phone call to my boss, the stolen documents, the way his family had circled like I was the enemy. "No," I said simply. "This was over before either of us filed. We just didn't want to admit it." He reached for my arm. I stepped back. "The divorce is final," I added. "Move on. I am." Behind him, his sister glared, like she wanted to say something sharp, something cutting, something that might hurt enough to reclaim a little power. I didn't give her the chance. I walked away. For the first time in months, I didn't look back. The house closed 2 weeks later. Papers signed, funds transferred. The equity split exactly as ordered. My down payment returned first, then the remainder divided evenly. When the numbers landed in my account, I felt something unexpected, not triumph, not relief, but finality. The kind that settles deep in your chest and stays there quiet and immovable. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment downtown a few days after that. Smaller than the house, but lighter somehow. No echoes of arguments in the hallway. No tension clinging to the walls. I slept better almost immediately. No more walking on eggshells. No more forced dinners, pretending everything was fine. Work stabilized too. My manager and I actually laughed about the concerned phone call once everything was finalized. She told me off the record that HR gets at least a couple of those calls a year, spouses trying to weaponize worry when they run out of leverage. Hearing that stripped the moment of its power. It had never been about me. It had been about control. He didn't land as softly. He moved in with his sister temporarily. I heard through mutual acquaintances that the arrangement was already strained. Turns out relying on combined income for years makes solo living a harsh adjustment. Space issues, money arguments, resentment creeping in from both sides. His mother, meanwhile, continued telling anyone who would listen that I'd destroyed her son's life. I didn't correct the story. The $1,200 he owed me still hadn't been paid by the deadline. My lawyer sent a demand letter. If it goes to small claims, it goes to small claims. At this point, it isn't about the money. It's about closing every open loop. A week after the divorce was finalized, I ran into his former college roommate at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable, then relieved when she saw me. "I owe you an apology," she said. "He painted this picture of you being controlling, unstable." After watching the court proceedings, I realized it wasn't true. I thanked her. Late honesty is still honesty. Sometimes I think back to that first night, the folders on the table, the moment his expression shifted when he realized his plan had failed. That's the part people fixate on, the twist, the satisfaction. But that wasn't the real ending. The real ending was quieter. It was realizing we were both planning exits, but only one of us wanted to win. He wanted control. He wanted advantage. He wanted the story to end on his terms. I just wanted it to end cleanly. He tried to file first and call it maturity. When that failed, he tried guilt. When guilt failed, he tried pressure. When pressure failed, he tried sabotage. And when none of that worked, he tried rewriting history. I didn't fight him emotionally. I didn't yell. I didn't retaliate in public. I stuck to facts, process, and documentation. I let the system do what it's designed to do when someone mistakes entitlement for protection. Do I regret the marriage? Parts of it were good. The first year especially, but the last year was a slow decay we both felt, and neither of us named. If anything, I regret not ending it sooner before fear turned into strategy. But I don't regret how I handled the divorce. He wanted a divorce on his terms. He got one on equal terms. That's not cruelty. That's reality. I'm 35 now, divorced, starting over. And for the first time in a long time, my future feels open instead of negotiated. That's enough for me. My name is Helen Brooks, and I was 38 years old when the man I thought I'd grow old with sat me down after our children went to sleep and asked me to choose between him and my sister. At first, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt absurd, like a line from a bad drama that didn't belong in our living room. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get once toys are put away and bedtime stories are done. I remember thinking he looked unusually calm, almost rehearsed, sitting across from me on the couch with his hands folded like this was a meeting he'd scheduled. "I need you to choose," he said. "Me or your sister." We had been together for 7 years. 2 kids, a shared life filled with routines, sacrifices, inside jokes, and the kind of trust you don't realize you're relying on until it cracks beneath your feet. Nothing in our history prepared me for what he said next. "I'm done sharing you." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. "Sharing me?" I asked. "She's my sister." He exhaled sharply, already irritated like I was being deliberately dense. "She's always there. Every decision. Every holiday. Every birthday. I'm tired of it." That didn't match reality, not even close. My older sister lived 20 minutes away. We texted a few times a week, had dinner maybe once a month. She was their aunt. She showed up because that's what family does. She didn't intrude. She didn't interfere. She didn't overstay. "I'm not cutting her off," I said slowly. "That's not even a choice." His face hardened. Then I guess I know where I stand. That night, he slept in the guest room. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. And that's when I knew something was very, very wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that the ultimatum hadn't come from insecurity or jealousy, but from fear. Fear of something surfacing. Fear of someone who knew too much. So the next day, I called my sister. There was a long pause on the line. "Can we meet in person?" she finally said. "There's something I need to tell you." And just like that, everything I thought I knew about my life began to unravel. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and rain-soaked pavement, the kind of place people chose for serious conversations because it felt neutral, anonymous. My sister was already there when I arrived, sitting stiffly with both hands wrapped around her cup, like she needed the warmth to steady herself. She looked composed at first glance. Tailored coat hair, perfectly in place, but I'd known her my entire life. The tension sat in her shoulders tight and unyielding. My sister didn't get rattled. Not by boardroom confrontations, not by audits, not by high-stakes financial disputes. Seeing her like this made my stomach tighten before she'd even spoken. I didn't want to do this in public, she said as soon as I sat down, her voice low. But I didn't want to do it at your house either. That was my first real warning. Not the ultimatum from my boyfriend. Not the way he'd slept in the guest room and then pretended everything was fine. This, my sister, choosing a neutral location like she was about to deliver evidence. What's going on, I asked. Did something happen between you and him? She hesitated, eyes flicking to the window before settling back on me. I found something, and I wasn't looking for it. The words hit heavier than they should have. Found what? A few months ago, she said slowly, I was finishing the last details of Mom's estate. You remember how long probate dragged on? Of course I remembered. Almost a year of paperwork, phone calls, and late-night emails. My sister had handled most of it. She was a corporate accountant who specialized in financial investigations. If anyone in the family could untangle a mess, it was her. There was a discrepancy, she continued. A big one. I frowned. We already got our shares. Did you verify that? She asked gently. The question made my chest tighten. What are you saying? Instead of answering, she slid a thin folder across the table toward me. Inside were bank statements, transaction histories, highlighted numbers I didn't fully understand yet. But one thing was immediately clear: dates, amounts, patterns. Mom's investment account was supposed to be split evenly, she said. 400,000 total. 200 for you, 200 for me. I know, I said. Mine went into our savings. She shook her head. It didn't. The cafe noise faded into a dull hum. What do you mean it didn't? Your boyfriend opened a separate account 3 weeks before Mom died, she said. When your inheritance hit your personal account, he transferred your 200,000 into that account within 48 hours. I stared at her. That's impossible. He couldn't. He had access, she said quietly, and it's in his name only. My hands felt numb as I flipped through the pages. There it was. The account number. The transfer timeline. The balance. Black and white. Unarguable. Why would he do this? I whispered. We're not struggling. We're fine. I don't know, she said. But I do know this: when I started asking questions, he told me to stay out of things that didn't concern me. A cold wave washed over me. When was this? 2 months ago, she said. When I told him I planned to talk to you, he threatened me. Threatened you? How? Her jaw tightened. He said if I said anything, he'd make sure I never saw the kids again. That he'd tell you I was trying to sabotage your relationship. That I was obsessed with you. Jealous of him. The ultimatum snapped into place in my mind like a final puzzle piece. He wasn't trying to push boundaries. He was trying to eliminate the one person who could expose him. I almost stayed quiet, my sister admitted. I didn't want to hurt you, but when he demanded you choose, I knew he was getting desperate. I sat back staring at the folder, my entire body buzzing with shock. 7 years, 2 kids, a shared life built on something I'd thought was trust. What do I do? I asked. That's up to you, she said. I just couldn't let you live without knowing. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Thank you for telling me. That night, I went home and checked the account myself. It was real, still active, holding over $215,000. And that was when I realized the man sleeping under my roof wasn't just lying to me. He'd been planning his exit the entire time. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while he slept in the next room. The house filled with the soft, innocent sounds of our children breathing down the hall. I felt like I was sharing a home with someone I'd never actually met. Every memory from the past 7 years replayed itself through a new lens. Every reassurance, every financial decision, every moment I'd brushed off a strange feeling because love had taught me not to question. I didn't confront him, not yet. I needed facts, not just fury. The next morning, while he packed lunches and joked with the kids like nothing had changed, I slipped into the bathroom and locked the door. My hands were shaking as I opened our banking apps, my heart pounding so loudly, I was afraid he'd hear it through the walls. I told myself I was being dramatic, that there had to be an explanation. There wasn't. The account was real. a separate bank, his name only. The balance sat there calmly, unapologetically, at just over $215,000. Interest had accumulated. It hadn't been touched in months, like money set aside, deliberately, patiently waiting. An exit fund. I felt nauseous. I went through everything slowly, methodically, the way my sister would. Dates lined up perfectly with the distribution of my mother's estate. 48 hours. That was all it took for him to move my inheritance out of reach before I'd even had time to notice it existed. He hadn't panicked. He hadn't rushed. He'd planned. At breakfast, he asked me if I wanted coffee. I nodded and thanked him, my voice steady despite the storm inside my chest. I watched him kiss the kids' heads. Before school watched him smile at me, like he always did, like this wasn't a man who'd stolen from me and then tried to erase my sister to keep his secret buried. That was the worst part, the normalcy. The way he laughed, the way he complained about traffic, the way he asked what we should make for dinner. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. The luxury skincare products he claimed were on sale. The designer bag he said his mother had bought him. The spa days he paid for in cash. None of it had ever raised alarms because we were comfortable. I trusted him. Trust makes you blind in small, dangerous ways. I began documenting everything. Screenshots of the account, copies of statements, dates, amounts, notes written in a private journal I kept hidden at the bottom of a drawer. Every interaction that felt even slightly off, I wrote down. When he snapped at me for texting my sister. When he casually mentioned that maybe the kids didn't need to see her so often. When he asked a little too carefully if I'd talked to her lately. A few days later, I met with a divorce attorney during my lunch break, sitting in a quiet office that smelled faintly of old books and lemon cleaner. I laid everything out on the table, the secret account, the transfers, the ultimatum, the threats. Her expression shifted from polite professionalism to something sharper as she reviewed the documents. "This is serious," she said. "Inheritances are separate property in most states. What he did could be considered financial deception, possibly worse." "What are my options?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "That depends on what you want," she said. "But you have leverage, a lot of it." I walked out of that office knowing one thing for certain: he still thought he was in control. He thought I was confused, emotional cornered. I let him believe it. Because sometimes the most dangerous moment isn't when the truth comes out, it's when the liar thinks they've already won. Once I knew what to look for, I started seeing it everywhere. It began subtly. Offhand comments, casual observations wrapped in concern, the kind of remarks that sound harmless unless you recognize the pattern forming underneath them. "You've been distracted lately," he said one evening while loading the dishwasher. "Ever since your sister started inserting herself again." I didn't respond. I just watched the water swirl in the sink, my reflection warped and unrecognizable. A few days later, he mentioned that his parents wanted to have dinner on Sunday. Nothing big, he said too quickly, just family. By then I understood what that meant. It wasn't about dinner, it was about witnesses. Sunday night, his parents' house felt tense before we'd even sat down. His mother kept giving me long, searching looks. His father avoided eye contact entirely. His brother jumped into conversation like he was already mid-argument. "We're worried about you," his mother said after dessert, folding her napkin with exaggerated care. "You seem pulled in too many directions." My pulse stayed calm. I'd expected this. "What do you mean?" "Your relationship with your sister," his brother cut in. "It's not normal for a grown woman to prioritize her sibling over her own family." I turned toward my boyfriend. He was staring at his plate jaw, tight, like this was difficult for him, like he hadn't orchestrated the entire thing. "My sister lives 20 minutes away," I said evenly. "We see her maybe once a month." "It's not about distance," he said finally. "It's emotional. Every time something happens, you go to her." That wasn't true, and he knew it. But facts don't matter when you're rewriting history in front of an audience. His mother nodded sympathetically. "Boundaries are healthy. Sometimes family can be too close." I felt the weight of it, then, the careful framing, the shared glances. He hadn't just vented, he'd prepared them, fed them a version of events where he was the neglected partner and I was the unreasonable one, incapable of detaching from my sister. "She's their aunt," I said. "She's supposed to be there. Maybe she should focus on building her own life instead of clinging to yours," his brother said, his tone sharp enough to draw blood. The room went quiet. I didn't react. I didn't defend. I didn't explode the way they were clearly bracing for. I just nodded slowly like someone absorbing feedback. "I'll think about it," I said. The relief on his face was instant. The tension dissolved. On the drive home, he was chatty, almost giddy, like a man who thought he'd successfully steered the narrative back in his favor. That night after he fell asleep, I called my sister. "They're trying to isolate me," I said quietly. "Make me cut you off before I can act." She didn't sound surprised. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to let him think he's winning," I said. "And then I'm going to expose everything." Over the next week, I moved carefully. I contacted my mother's estate lawyer and confirmed what my sister had already told me: the inheritance was supposed to go directly to me. No one else had authority to touch it. Every transfer had been documented. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and redirected a small portion of my paycheck there. Not enough to raise suspicion, just enough to give me breathing room. And then I started gathering witnesses, friends, co-workers, anyone who'd seen our relationship clearly enough to counter the story he was spreading. I didn't rush. I didn't confront. Because he wasn't just lying to me anymore. He was building a case, and I was about to tear it apart. The invitation came 3 weeks later, delivered with a softness that made my skin crawl. "I think we need to do this properly," he said one evening while the kids colored at the table. "A real conversation, with everyone there. No misunderstandings." I looked up from my phone. "Everyone. My parents, my brother, my aunt," he said, "and your sister. I think it's important she hears how her involvement has affected our marriage." There it was. The confidence. The assumption that I was cornered, that I'd already accepted his version of reality. He thought this was the final step, public pressure, moral high ground, the moment where I'd finally be forced to choose. "I agree," I said calmly. "We should talk it out." The relief on his face was immediate. He had no idea I'd already extended another invitation. The day of the intervention, his parents' dining room felt more like a courtroom than a family space. Chairs were arranged carefully, water glasses lined up. Everyone arrived early, tense and expectant. My sister came first, composed, but alert, her eyes meeting mine with quiet understanding. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. He arrived last, confident, almost buoyant. "Thank you all for coming," he began, standing at the head of the table like a man about to deliver a keynote speech. "I know this is uncomfortable, but I love Helen, and I need to protect our marriage." He spoke smoothly, rehearsed, about emotional neglect, about feeling second place, about my sister's constant presence. His family nodded along, murmuring in agreement. They'd heard this version before. Then he turned to my sister. "This isn't personal. I just need my partner to be fully present in our relationship." She didn't respond. She just looked at me. That's when the door opened. "Sorry I'm late," a man said, stepping inside and glancing around the room. "Traffic was terrible." My boyfriend froze. This I said evenly as the attorney who handled my mother's estate. Confusion rippled through the room. His mother frowned. "Why is he here?" "Because since we're discussing family matters," I said, pulling a familiar folder from my bag, "I think it's time we discuss the money." I laid the documents out one by one. Bank statements, transfer records, dates, amounts. The air grew heavy as the truth settled in. 2 years ago, I said I inherited $200,000 from my mother. That money was supposed to go into our household savings. Instead, it was transferred into a private account, one I didn't know existed. "That's not," he started. The lawyer spoke calmly. "The funds were deposited into Helen's personal account on March 15th. Within 48 hours, they were moved to an account registered solely in your name." His mother picked up the papers, her hands shaking slightly. "Is this real?" He looked at me, panic flickering behind his eyes. "It was for emergencies. For us." "Then why didn't I know about it?" I asked. "Why was it hidden? Why did you threaten my sister to keep her quiet?" Silence. The carefully constructed narrative collapsed in on itself. His aunt spoke first. "So you wanted her sister gone because she knew?" His brother stared at the table, jaw clenched. His mother's face drained of color. "I was scared," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I needed security." "So you stole from me," I said, and tried to isolate me from the only person who noticed. No one defended him. Not this time. The meeting ended quickly after that. People left without knowing what to say. The performance was over. The truth was out. As my sister and I walked to the car, she let out a long breath. That was intense. "It's not over," I said, "but now everyone knows who he really is." And for the first time since this all began, I felt the power shift completely. Once the truth was out, he didn't apologize. He pivoted. The calm, wounded partner persona disappeared almost overnight, replaced by something sharper and more desperate. He stopped pretending we were a couple trying to work through issues and started treating everything like a negotiation he could still win. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Regret would have sounded different. This was strategy. The legal process began quietly but moved fast. My lawyer filed first armed with documentation so thorough it left very little room for interpretation. Bank records, estate documents, timelines, screenshots, a clean, methodical record of deception that stretched back 2 years. He denied the account existed. When that failed, he claimed it was marital property. When that collapsed under basic legal scrutiny, he shifted again, arguing that he had been managing our finances and that everything he did was for the family. The language was careful, rehearsed, and hollow. He wasn't defending the truth. He was testing angles. The court didn't buy it. Inheritance law was clear. My mother's money was separate property. It had never touched a joint account. It had been moved within 48 hours, deliberately and quietly, to an account in his name only. That single detail destroyed every argument he tried to make. But the money was only half the battle. Custody is where he went for blood. His lawyers painted him as the primary caregiver, the devoted father who had scaled back his career while I worked full-time. Technically, parts of that were true. But context matters, and truth without context is just another manipulation. My lawyer dismantled the narrative piece by piece. The threats to my sister, the attempt to isolate me from family, the intervention staged under false pretenses, the documented pattern of financial deception. And then came the journal. I hadn't gone looking for it. I'd found it by accident on his laptop while backing up family photos for court, an unprotected document saved under a generic file name. Inside were entries spanning months, plans, contingencies, thoughts about positioning the kids emotionally if things fell apart, notes about making sure they sided with him. The custody evaluator took that very seriously. Interviews followed. Long ones. With me. With him. With my sister. With friends and coworkers who could speak to stability and consistency. Even his own mother admitted reluctantly that her son struggled with honesty when he felt threatened. That admission mattered more than she realized. The evaluator's report was clear. While both parents loved the children, one had demonstrated a pattern of manipulation, secrecy, and willingness to weaponize relationships. Stability required transparency. The ruling came down on a gray Tuesday morning. Joint legal custody, 60-40 physical custody, primary residential parent me. He exploded in the courthouse hallway. "You're taking my children because of money," he shouted loud enough for people to stare. "No," I said evenly. "I'm protecting them because of your choices." He went pale when my lawyer mentioned the journal. "You read that," he hissed. "That was private." "So was my inheritance," I said. "You didn't seem concerned about privacy then." He didn't respond. He just turned and walked away, gripping his lawyer's arm like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The war was over, and he had lost far more than he ever planned to risk. Life didn't snap back into place once the court rulings were finalized. There was no sudden calm, no cinematic fade-out, where everything felt resolved just because the paperwork said it was. What followed was quieter than the chaos that came before, but heavier in a different way, the kind of weight that settles in after the adrenaline fades. I moved with the kids into a smaller place not far from their school. It wasn't grand, but it was ours. Familiar routines slowly reformed, morning drop-offs, homework. At the kitchen table, bedtime stories read from the same worn books they'd always loved. I focused on consistency, on giving them something solid when everything else in their world had shifted. He didn't take the outcome well. At first, his messages were frantic, long paragraphs accusing me of betrayal, of destroying our family, of humiliating him in front of his parents. When that didn't get a response, the tone turned bitter and sharp. He complained about the custody schedule, about money, about how unfair everything was. Not once did he acknowledge the account, the threats, the manipulation. In his mind, those details were irrelevant footnotes in a story where he was the victim. I forwarded every message to my lawyer and stopped replying altogether. His family, interestingly, kept their distance. After the intervention, the illusion they'd been fed had shattered too completely to be repaired with excuses. His mother sent a short text a week after the ruling. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." I never responded, but I appreciated the honesty. It was more accountability than her son ever showed. My sister became my anchor through all of it. She helped set up the apartment. She picked the kids up from school when court dates ran late. She became their emergency contact, their constant. Everything he had tried to strip away from me, my support system, my sense of stability, she quietly helped rebuild. The kids asked questions, of course. "Why doesn't Daddy live with us anymore?" I kept my answers simple. gentle, age-appropriate. Sometimes grown-ups decide to live in different houses, but we both love you very much. My therapist helped me find that language, helped me understand how important it was not to make them carry adult truths they weren't ready to hold. He didn't show the same restraint. The kids came home from his weekends with questions that twisted my stomach. Daddy says you were mean to him. Daddy says Auntie shouldn't come over anymore. I documented every instance, every word, every shift in behavior. My lawyer warned me gently that if it continued, we'd need to address it legally. Parental alienation wasn't taken lightly. The money was back where it belonged. Most of it went straight into accounts earmarked for the kids' futures college funds, long-term security. The rest helped stabilize our new life. I knew my mother would have approved. She'd saved every penny with intention. It felt right to honor that. He moved back in with his parents. On his part-time income, he couldn't afford a place of his own, and the settlement hadn't left him with much flexibility. He resented me for that too, as if consequences were something I'd personally assigned him, rather than the natural outcome of his own actions. Every so often, he'd send one last jab, one final attempt to provoke a reaction. Your sister won. One message read, I hope you're happy being married to her instead. I didn't respond. Projection loses its power when you recognize it for what it is. I was exhausted, yes. But for the first time in months, I wasn't confused. The fog was gone. I could see my life clearly, what I'd lost, what I'd kept, and what I was slowly rebuilding. And I knew this wasn't the end of the story yet. The quiet came slowly, not all at once. It arrived in pieces, an uninterrupted night of sleep, a morning where my chest didn't tighten when my phone buzzed. An afternoon where laughter came easily again. I didn't notice it at first. Healing rarely announces itself. It just shows up one day and stays. I stopped waiting for him to understand what he'd done. That was the final lesson. Accountability isn't something you can force on someone who's spent their life rewriting reality to suit themselves. In his version of events, he was still the wrong party, the partner pushed too far. The parent unfairly judged the man punished for trying to protect his family. Admitting the truth would mean admitting intent, and intent would mean accepting blame. He wasn't built for that. I was done trying to make him see. The kids settled into the new rhythm faster than I expected. Children are resilient when they're given stability and honesty without cruelty. Our apartment began to feel like home, not because of the furniture or the layout, but because it was free of tension. No walking on eggshells, no half-truths humming under the surface. Just life, imperfect, but real. My sister came by often, sometimes to help, sometimes just to sit on the floor with the kids and build something out of blocks. Watching her with them, I understood something I hadn't fully grasped before. Family isn't the people who demand loyalty at the expense of truth. It's the people who risk discomfort to protect you from a lie. She could have stayed silent. She could have let me live in ignorance and avoided the fallout. Instead, she chose honesty, knowing it might cost her everything. That mattered more than I could ever put into words. The money sat safely where it belonged. Most of it untouched, earmarked for futures that mattered more than comfort or appearances. I didn't feel triumphant about getting it back. I felt relieved, like something stolen had finally been returned to its rightful place, not just the inheritance, but my sense of reality. Every once in a while, I still receive messages from him. Complaints, accusations, reminders of how unfair the world has been to him. I don't engage. I forward them, file them away, and move on. Silence, I've learned, is sometimes the clearest boundary you can set. People ask if I'm angry. I was. For a long time. Angry at him for the betrayal. Angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. Angry at how easily trust can be weaponized by the wrong person. But anger burns itself out if you don't keep feeding it. What replaced it wasn't forgiveness, it was clarity. Here's what I know now. Trust is not blind faith. Love does not mean surrendering awareness. Pay attention to your finances. Ask questions. Notice patterns. If something feels off, it probably is. And if someone tries to isolate you from the people who love you, ask yourself why. My ex wanted me to choose between him and my sister. In the end, he made the choice for me. By stealing. By lying. By manipulating. By believing he was clever enough to get away with it forever. He didn't just lose a relationship or a financial cushion or the narrative he worked so hard to control. He lost trust. He lost credibility. He lost the future he thought he was securing in secret. And I gained something far more valuable than the money he tried to hide. I gained the truth. My name is Renita Flores, and I was 32 years old, the night I realized that someone I barely thought about had been quietly rooting for my marriage to fail. I'd been married to Gilbert Flores for 5 years at that point. We met in college, dated for 3 years, got engaged after graduation, and built a life that by every reasonable measure worked. We weren't flashy, we weren't dramatic, we were comfortable in a way that felt earned. Movie nights where we argued over what to watch, shared grocery lists on our phones, inside jokes that didn't need explaining. Gilbert was my person, the one I wanted to tell things to first, the one who made silence feel safe instead of awkward. So when we decided to throw an anniversary party for our 5th year, it wasn't because anything was wrong. It was because 5 years felt like something worth honoring. We rented a private room at a restaurant downtown, warm lighting. Exposed brick long wooden tables. About 40 friends and family came. My parents flew in. Gilbert's brother drove 6 hours. His ex-girlfriend Lauren Hale was there too. She and Gilbert had dated briefly in college, years before me, and had stayed in the same extended friend circle ever since. I'd never loved that fact, but I'd never been threatened by it either. The night was going perfectly. The food was incredible. People laughed easily. Gilbert kept squeezing my hand whenever he walked past me. I wore a deep emerald dress I'd been excited about for weeks, and he told me twice that I looked stunning. Around 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A client issue. I stepped into the hallway to take the call, expecting it to last maybe 2 minutes. That's when Lauren blocked my path back to the room. "Hey," she said, her voice already a little too familiar. She'd been drinking not sloppy, but enough that her confidence had edged into recklessness. "Can we talk?" "Sure," I said, distracted, still half thinking about the call. "What's up?" She took a breath, a big one, like someone about to deliver bad news they'd rehearsed. "You need to leave Gilbert." I laughed. It was automatic, a reflex. "What?" "I'm serious," she said. "You need to break up with him. He deserves someone better." The hallway suddenly felt too quiet. Through the door, I could hear the party glasses clinking laughter. Gilbert's voice somewhere inside, completely unaware. "Excuse me," I said. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she continued. "You're fine, I guess." But he could do so much better. He settled. He was scared of being alone after college. "I've watched him dim himself down to fit your life for years." She said it like it was a kindness. This was a woman who'd attended our wedding, who'd hugged me afterward, who'd eaten at our table during holidays. "He deserves someone with more drive," she went on. "Someone who matches his energy. You're safe, comfortable, boring." Something shifted in me then, not anger, clarity. I looked at her and said calmly, "You might be right." She blinked. "Wait, really?" "Yeah," I said. "Let's go talk about it with everyone." Before she could respond, I walked back into the room. She followed, clearly thinking she'd won. I found Gilbert near the dessert table laughing with his sister. I placed my hand on his back. He smiled at me immediately. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. Then louder. "Hey, can I get everyone's attention for a second?" The room quieted. About 40 faces turned toward us. Gilbert looked confused but trusting. "I just had an interesting conversation in the hallway," I said. "Lauren told me I need to leave Gilbert, that he deserves someone better, that he settled, that I'm boring." Silence fell like a dropped plate. Gilbert's face drained of color. Lauren's went white. "I didn't," she started. "Did you say it?" I asked. Everyone looked at her. Gilbert turned slowly. "Lauren." She had no answer. And in that moment, I knew this night would change everything. The room didn't erupt the way movies make moments like that erupt. There was no shouting, no dramatic gasp, no chaos. It was worse than that. It was still, heavy. 40 people collectively holding their breath, waiting to see who would speak next and what truth would land hardest. Gilbert was the first to move. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry at first. He just looked stunned, like someone had walked into his childhood home and informed him it had never been his. "Lauren," he said slowly, "did you tell my wife she should leave me?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're twisting my words." I repeated them, I said quietly. "That's not twisting." Gilbert's sister frowned. My mother-in-law stepped closer. Someone near the back cleared their throat, then stopped like they realized this wasn't their place to speak. "I was trying to help Lauren," said her voice cracking. "You complain sometimes. I complained to you because I thought you were my friend," Gilbert said, finally finding his anger. "Not because I wanted you to intervene in my marriage." That was when Gilbert's father spoke, voice firm and calm in a way that made the room listen. "Lauren, I think you should leave. She looked around, desperate for backup. There was none. Her boyfriend, Mark, the +1 she'd brought, was already pulling on his jacket, eyes wide like he was seeing her for the first time. "We're going," he muttered. "But we're leaving," he repeated, sharper this time, and guided her toward the door. The moment it closed behind them, the air finally moved again. Someone laughed nervously. Gilbert's dad raised his glass. "Well," he said, "to 5 years of marriage to a boring, safe man." The tension cracked just enough for people to breathe. Gilbert squeezed my hand hard. "We're talking later," he murmured. "I know," I said. And somehow, impossibly, the rest of the party went on. People came up to me quietly, told me I'd handled it well. Gilbert's brother called it the most satisfying thing he'd ever witnessed. My mother-in-law hugged me 3 times, but beneath every smile, every toast, I felt it. This wasn't over. A week later, it was clear how not over it was. Gilbert and I spent 4 hours one night talking, not arguing, talking, picking apart moments we'd ignored, comments that had felt off but small enough to brush aside. Lauren's concern about my job being stable but not exciting. The way she'd show Gilbert photos of old college acquaintances who'd made it big. The way she suggested weekend trips without me during our anniversaries. How she encouraged him to treat himself whenever we were saving for something together. At the time, it had all felt supportive. Now it felt strategic. We went through old texts, threads stretching back years, subtle digs disguised as care, questions like, "Are you sure she's pushing you enough? And don't you ever wonder what else is out there?" Gilbert stared at his phone, jaw tight. I never saw it. "I didn't either," I said, until she said it out loud. Then Monday happened. Gilbert got a text from a mutual friend. "Hey, I don't want to stir things up, but you should know what's being said about Renita." Lauren had started damage control. According to her version, I'd been verbally abusive at the party. I'd humiliated her publicly for no reason. I'd been drinking too much. She was just a caring friend who'd tried to check in privately about Gilbert's happiness. She'd sent a message to their entire college friend group, 15 people, painting herself as the victim of my explosive temper. I read it twice, then a third time. "I've been worried about him for years," she wrote. I finally worked up the courage to express my concerns to his wife, hoping we could work together to help him. Instead, she dragged me in front of everyone. "I've never been so scared of someone in my life. Please check on him. I'm worried he's in a controlling relationship." Controlling. Gilbert went nuclear. He called 6 friends who'd been at the party, put them on speaker, asked them point blank. "Did Renita raise her voice?" "No." "Did she seem drunk?" "No." "Did I seem afraid of her?" Silence. Then laughter. "You seemed pissed at Lauren," someone said. "That's about it." One friend added, "I heard most of it through the hallway door. Lauren told Renita to leave you. She's not twisting anything." The truth spread faster than Lauren expected, but she wasn't done. Tuesday night at exactly 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it. Lauren pushed past me like she owned the place. "We need to talk," she said. "All 3 of us. Like adults." Gilbert came out of the bedroom already tense. "What are you doing here?" "Fixing this," she snapped. "Your wife has clearly turned you against me." I crossed my arms. "You told me to leave my husband at our anniversary party." "I was drunk," she said. "People say stupid things. You should have let it go." Gilbert stepped forward. "You've been undermining my marriage for years." Her face flickered, just for a second. "I was being a good friend," she insisted. "You don't get to define my happiness," he said. "I know you better than she does," Lauren shot back. The room went silent. She hadn't meant to say it that loud. "I think you need to leave," Gilbert said finally. "No," she said, "not until we fix this." "There's nothing to fix," he replied. "You crossed a line." She laughed then, bitter, hollow. "You'll regret this when your marriage falls apart." I watched her go without a word. When the door closed, Gilbert sank onto the couch and put his head in his hands. And that's when I knew this was about to get worse. For about a week after Lauren stormed out of our apartment, nothing happened. No texts, no surprise visits, no vague posts on social media. The silence was almost convincing. Gilbert and I started to believe stupidly optimistically that she'd finally hit a wall. That exposure had done what we hoped it would do, forced her to retreat. Then my phone rang at work. It was my manager. "Hey, Renita," she said carefully. Too carefully. "Do you know someone who might have a grudge against you?" My stomach dropped so fast I had to grip the edge of my desk. "Why?" "We received an anonymous complaint to HR," she continued. "It alleges you've made inappropriate comments toward male coworkers. Specific names, dates, detailed incidents." I felt cold, like someone had opened a door in my chest and let the air rush out. "That's not true," I said immediately. "None of that is true." "I know," she said. 2 of the dates listed you were out of the office. Conference travel, we've verified that. But HR still has to investigate. Of course they did. The investigation lasted 8 days. 8 days of being pulled into small rooms with neutral walls and neutral faces. 8 days of answering the same questions phrased slightly differently. 8 days of wondering who was looking at me differently in the break room, who was replaying rumors in their head instead of facts. Every coworker named in the complaint was interviewed. Every single one said the same thing: confusion. Nothing inappropriate, nothing even close. Security footage was checked. Emails reviewed. The complaint was eventually dismissed as unsubstantiated and potentially malicious. But the damage lingered. Cleared doesn't mean untouched. It means you survive with a scar. I had no proof it was Lauren. The email was anonymous. VPN masked. Nothing traceable. But one of the alleged incidents described a work happy hour I'd mentioned to her months earlier in passing. The timing wasn't coincidence. Gilbert confronted her over text. "Did you file a false HR complaint against my wife?" Her reply came fast. "I don't know what you're talking about. But if someone did, maybe there's truth to it." "There isn't. It was dismissed." Just because HR dismissed it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Women like her know how to hide things. Women like her. Gilbert blocked her immediately. But she wasn't done yet. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. It was Mark, Lauren's ex-boyfriend. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "I know this is weird. I just wanted to apologize for what I asked, for being part of this. I broke up with her the night of your party." That didn't surprise me. What he said next did. "She admitted she'd never really been in love with me," he said. "She said she'd been waiting for Gilbert's marriage to fail." I sat down hard. "She said you were temporary," he continued, "that she just needed someone so she didn't look alone. She thought eventually he'd realize he deserved more and come back to her." Everything clicked at once. The undermining, the entitlement, the certainty. It wasn't about me being boring. It was about her being replaced. When I told Gilbert, he went quiet for a long time. "She helped me pick your ring," he said finally. "She stood next to me at the wedding." "She watched us get married," I said, and said nothing, he replied. The betrayal settled differently after that. Deeper, heavier. The next morning, Gilbert sent a message to the shared friend group. Not emotional, not accusatory, just factual. The party, the confrontation, the lies, the HR complaint, and finally what Mark had told us. The response was immediate. Women started replying, one by one. Stories surfaced. Similar patterns, similar concerns, similar attempts to plant doubt where there had been trust. Within 2 weeks, Lauren was blocked by everyone. Her mother called Gilbert furious, demanding explanations. He gave them, with receipts. Well, her mother said coldly, she was just looking out for her friends. The entitlement suddenly made sense. Last I heard, Lauren moved back in with her parents. She filed a harassment complaint against me with the police. It went nowhere. The officer sounded apologetic. "I'm sorry," he said. "There's nothing here. Gilbert and I are okay. Better than okay." Something about surviving this together stripped away the small stuff. We talk more, check in, don't let silence grow teeth. I still think about transparency, about how quiet manipulation thrives until it's named. And yeah, I'm boring, safe, comfortable. Turns out my husband likes that just fine. For a few days after the HR investigation officially closed, life existed in a strange, in-between state. On paper, everything was resolved. I was cleared. My job was safe. No formal record. No disciplinary note. But the air around me at work had shifted. Conversations paused when I entered rooms. Laughter felt delayed. People were polite, too polite, as if they were afraid of saying the wrong thing to the wrong person. At home, Gilbert tried to pretend none of it mattered. "It's done," he said one night as we ate dinner in front of the TV, neither of us actually watching. "They found nothing. That's what counts." I nodded, but the knot in my chest didn't loosen. Because whoever sent that complaint hadn't been trying to win. They'd been trying to damage. And damage doesn't disappear just because it fails. 3 nights later, my phone buzzed with a message request on social media. It was from Mark, Lauren's ex-boyfriend. "Hey, I don't know if you'll even want to hear from me, but I feel like you should know something." I stared at the screen for a long moment before responding. "Okay." He asked if he could call. I said yes. His voice sounded exhausted. Not angry, not defensive, just tired in the way people get when a truth finally lands and refuses to be ignored. "I broke up with her the night of your anniversary party," he said. "Not because of what happened in public, but because of what happened after." "What do you mean?" I asked. She admitted something on the drive home. She said she'd never really loved me. I closed my eyes. She said she'd been waiting, he continued. Waiting for Gilbert to realize he'd made a mistake. Waiting for your marriage to fail so she could be there for him. My hand tightened around the phone. She told me she'd felt this way since college, Mark said. That being with me was just convenient. That I helped her look normal. Normal. She said you were temporary, he added quietly. That eventually he'd come back. When the call ended, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time before I told Gilbert. He didn't speak at first. He just stared at the wall like it had betrayed him personally. She helped me pick your ring, he said eventually. She stood next to me at the altar. She watched us promise each other everything I said, and waited. The anger came later. First came grief. Not romantic grief, but the grief of realizing someone had been pretending for years, smiling in photos, laughing at dinners, holding secrets sharp enough to cut if used the right way. What was the plan, Gilbert asked. Just wait us out, probably, I said, or sabotage quietly until something cracked. He shook his head slowly. That's not love, that's entitlement. That night, Gilbert made a decision. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want drama. He wanted truth to exist in one place, clean, factual, undeniable. The next morning, he wrote a message to our shared friend group. No emotion, no speculation, just a timeline. The hallway conversation, the public confrontation, the lies, the HR complaint, and finally, what Mark had confessed. He sent it and put his phone down. The responses came faster than either of us expected. One woman replied first, then another. Then another. Stories surfaced, quietly at first, then with momentum. Comments about husbands holding them back. Suggestions that their marriages were compromises. Encouragement to skip important moments because he'll understand. A pattern emerged. Lauren hadn't just targeted us. She'd been doing this for years. And now finally people were comparing notes. Once the truth was out there, it didn't crawl. It moved fast. Gilbert's message didn't accuse, it didn't dramatize, it didn't ask anyone to pick sides. It simply laid events out in order like evidence placed carefully on a table, and then ended with one sentence, I'm sharing this so no one else gets hurt by the same pattern. That was all it took. Within minutes, replies started coming in. At first they were cautious, short, tentative. I had no idea. This is a lot. I'm really sorry you both went through this. Then one message landed that changed the tone completely. A woman named Rachel, someone we'd vacationed with once, someone Lauren had always been especially close to, wrote, I thought it was just me. Gilbert looked up from his phone when I gasped. Rachel followed up with a long message. She explained how Lauren had spent years telling her she'd settled for her husband, how she'd encouraged distance during rough patches instead of communication, how she'd framed every doubt as concern, every wedge as protection. I almost didn't invite my husband's parents to our wedding because of her, Rachel wrote. She said his family would hold me back. Another message came in. Then another. Different couples. Same themes. Same language. Same slow erosion disguised as care. One woman admitted she'd skipped her husband's promotion celebration because Lauren told her, if he really loved you, he'd understand. They'd fought about it for weeks afterward. Another said Lauren had encouraged her to keep financial secrets just in case. As the messages stacked up, something surreal happened. No one defended Lauren. Not one person. By the end of the week, she had been removed from group chats, unfollowed, blocked. 15 years of friendships didn't explode, they dissolved. Quietly, thoroughly, irreversibly. Gilbert sat beside me on the couch as we watched it unfold, phone buzzing nonstop. She did this to herself, he said softly. Yes, I replied, but she did it believing no one would ever compare notes. That same weekend, Lauren's mother called. Gilbert answered. I could hear the yelling through the phone. How could you do this to her? Her mother demanded. She's devastated. Everyone's treating her like a criminal. Gilbert stayed calm, explained, offered screenshots, timelines, messages. There was a long pause. Then her mother said she was just looking out for her friends. You're all overreacting. Gilbert ended the call without another word. The entitlement suddenly had a family tree. A few days later, I got a call from the local police department. A harassment complaint had been filed against me. I laughed at first, out of disbelief, out of exhaustion. The officer who spoke to me sounded apologetic. We have to follow up on these things, he said. But there's nothing here. You're fine. Lauren had tried one last time to regain control by dragging authority into it. It failed. By then, her world had already collapsed. She'd moved back in with her parents. Mark was dating someone new. Mutual friends stopped responding to her messages entirely. According to someone who still lived in her orbit, she told anyone who would listen that I'd orchestrated a campaign to destroy her life. The irony didn't escape me. I didn't orchestrate anything. I repeated her words. Others filled in the rest. Gilbert and I talked late into the nights during that period. Not about her, but about us. About boundaries we'd been too polite to enforce. About how easy it is to mistake familiarity for loyalty. I hate that she still takes up space in your head, he said once. I hate that she ever thought she had a claim on you, I replied. He pulled me close. She doesn't. She never did. The grief hit him unexpectedly sometimes, usually late at night when everything was quiet enough for memories to sneak in. Losing a friend you trusted since college doesn't stop hurting just because you understand why it had to end. I held him through it, reminded him that clarity doesn't erase loss, it just makes it survivable. We weren't triumphant. We were steadier. And in the aftermath of someone else's collapse, that felt like enough. In the weeks that followed, life didn't snap back into place the way people like to imagine it does after a crisis. There was no clean reset, no sudden sense of victory. Instead, things settled slowly, unevenly, like dust after something heavy crashes to the ground. Gilbert and I were quieter for a while. Not distant, just thoughtful. More deliberate with our words. More attentive to the spaces between them. The experience had stripped something away from both of us. Not trust in each other, but trust in proximity. The assumption that people who had been around forever would always mean well. That longevity automatically equaled loyalty. We talked more than we ever had before. Not in dramatic, tear-filled conversations, but in small, constant check-ins. How are you actually feeling about this? Did today bring anything up? Are you okay or just functioning? Some nights, Gilbert would wake up and sit on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped, staring at nothing. When I asked what was wrong, he'd shake his head and say, "I just can't believe how long I didn't see it." I understood that feeling too well. I thought about all the moments I'd smiled politely at Lauren. All the times I'd dismissed discomfort because it seemed too small to matter. How manipulation thrives not on cruelty, but on plausibility. She hadn't stormed in demanding my husband. She'd whispered doubts. She'd framed poison as protection. She'd waited for everyone else to do the work of dismantling themselves. That's what made it dangerous. The aftermath left casualties beyond her. Some friendships were strained, not because people disagreed with us, but because they were forced to reckon with how close they'd come to being quietly influenced. Guilt has a way of creating distance when people don't know where to put it. Work eventually normalized. The whispers faded. My reputation healed in pieces, not all at once, but enough that I could breathe again. I stopped flinching when HR emails came in. I stopped wondering who believed what. And slowly Lauren stopped being the center of the story. Not because she apologized, she never did, but because she no longer mattered. Gilbert and I didn't emerge stronger in a cinematic way. We didn't make grand declarations or post triumphant photos online. What we gained was quieter and more valuable. We gained clarity. We learned that confrontation doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like repeating the truth out loud and letting it stand where it can be seen. We learned that transparency isn't cruel, it's corrective, and that protecting a marriage doesn't mean avoiding discomfort. It means refusing to let manipulation live in the shadows. I still think about Lauren sometimes, not with anger, but with a kind of distant sadness, the unrequited feelings. The years spent orbiting a life she wanted instead of building one she owned. The choices she made when honesty would have cost her control. She had options: therapy, distance, truth. She chose sabotage. Even now, Gilbert still grieves the friendship he thought he had, the version of Lauren that never existed. Some losses don't come with closure, just acceptance. On those nights, I hold him and remind him of what didn't break. 5 years married when it happened. Hopefully 50 more ahead. And yes, if boring means stable, safe, and chosen every single day without games or manipulation, then I'll wear that label proudly. Turns out the life she tried to undermine is the one we're still standing in. Together.